ending early today. We're going to end at 10:30. So this will be abbreviated because we've got Mr. Wolf coming in and he's got to get set up and sound check and all that stuff. If you have an opportunity, when we end, they need some help over there moving tables and chairs and stuff. So if you have that, if not, then, appreciate you being here. This is going to be a special study. We are about to start a 10-week study on evangelism. And everything that you've been studying up until this point, everything that we've been kind of going through has really been leading up into this moment, right? You've been learning about apologetics. We've been learning about the mission of the church. We've been learning about, general Bible, deeper Bible information. Now, the rubber hits the road. When we go out into the world, we are supposed to be a light for Christ. And we are called to make disciples among all nations, to bring people to the faith, and to bring them to know Jesus Christ. Right? That's our calling. That's our mission. That's what Jesus wants us to do. Now, I understand that it's not everybody's forte. Right? Talking with people can be awkward. It can be difficult. It can be almost embarrassing is not really the right word, but maybe unfamiliar. Let's use that word. We're just not used to it. To talk about people with these very intimate conversations about life. And yet, we're called to do it. This session, it's called, hold on. Where did my thing go? It's got a long title, which is terrible. But
Is it on the right now?
It's called Soul Whisperer, Why the Church Must Change the Way It Views Evangelism by Gary Comer. Yes, it is on right now. There's a video series, and I will send you the link to it. Gary Comer is a graduate from Talbot School of Theology out in Pasadena, which is a well-renowned seminary. He has worked at large churches, small churches, and he's also worked on the mission board, dealing with how do we communicate the gospel in this world in which we live in. And so I was pre-watching this, really, kind of spot checking as I do, and I was really just so intrigued with it. I've already watched the whole thing. So I think there's a lot of wisdom here. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to start the videos next week. There's 11 videos total. We're going to combine the last two because the last one's more of a summary and a charge. But 10-week study. What I want to talk about today is kind of the big picture. And this is a very practical study. Like we're not just going to talk about big picture type stuff. He's going to talk about particular methods on how to talk. Like if you forget, like, what do I say? He's going to give you some pointers on, like, follow this method, right? He's going to give you some ideas on, things to say for these types of people. And I think it's just really fascinating. Now, I will say it's based off his book, which you can buy on Amazon. I bought the Kindle version for $10. Tiffany, I bought $10 less. I highly, it's not required for this course, but if you want to, I would encourage you to do it. Probably some of the things that I bring up will come out of the book. The videos obviously can't cover everything in the book. But we're going to talk about, so he has discovered, one of the things he talks about is, over the years, he has found there's really 8 types of he calls them paths, or people types. And so it goes from the curious to the skeptic to the emotional problem. Because not everybody, right, has a problem with God, but maybe they have a bad father figure in their life. And that's really holding them back. And so we're really reworking this idea of evangelism to be a more relational, deeper connection, to help people get over these hurdles to come to faith. And he's got some interviews with people that he's worked with on the videos, real world stuff. And I think you're really going to get a lot out of it. Now, the big picture today is we need to really think about the practicalities of evangelism. In the past, you've probably heard of certain, well, how do I share my faith? And I've heard this throughout the years. We talk about the ABCs of faith, right? Accept, believe, confess. We talk about the Roman road, right? Where you follow certain scripture paths to kind of show people about Christ. Those are all great. But the world has changed, right? When those things came up, that was probably 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and things have changed. Nowadays, when those things came up, well, let's go back. When those things came up, the world typically, and especially in America, was already primed for Christianity. Everybody shared, or most people shared, a common spiritual background, right? They knew what prayer meant. They knew what the Bible was. And they knew the authority of the Bible, by and large. Nowadays, that's not the case. I've seen kids that don't know what prayer is. I've seen people that maybe heard the Bible, but they really don't know what it is. And they sure don't know anything about the authority of the Bible. And so our approach really has to be different. In this age that we live in, there's lots of misinformation. There's lots of competing truths out there, right? And so we really need to be prepared to, when we're talking with people, to recognize these hurdles, and so that we can steer the conversation in a productive way. Because it's going to be very easy for you to steer a conversation into a dead end, and it's just going to be like a circular argument, right? Because why would they believe the Bible? They don't believe God. Why would they believe Jesus rose from the dead, right? These are claims that we make, and yet they have no basis on it. Like, why? And when we're steering the conversation, we need to recognize, like, is this a skeptic? Like, are they really actually questioning the Bible? Or are they questioning the Bible because maybe they know about the Bible, but they had a bad father figure? And so there's really an emotional problem. Or maybe it's something else. And we're going to learn about these types. Not that everybody fits one of these types, but in general, right? It's going to give you a nice tool belt to walk throughout the world and be prepared. Now, I will say this. Gary Comer focuses a lot on relationships, and relational evangelism. Now, this is different than standing on a street corner and passing out tracts. It's going to require a lot more work on your part. But I have always agreed with this. I think relational friendships really are the key. I think it's going to be a lot easier to get to that point where you talk about these delicate, deep, emotional conversation with somebody. Because you can't do this with a crowd, right? You cannot. So it's going to take some effort on your part because people are messy. And part of you is going to be saying, I really don't want to get involved with this. But at the same time, when we look at Jesus' example, right, he ate with sinners, right? And dining was a very intimate thing back then. Less so now, but it's still intimate. He got to know these people. He got to know their problems. He got to know where they're coming from. And in fact, on my sermon next week, I'm going to be talking about the spiritual journey of Thomas. And so we're going to see, not only is this something for today, but it was actually happening back then. We're just now putting a label to it, right, so we can understand. So I think we're really going to get a lot out of it practically. Now, in order to frame the conversation, let's talk about this. We have, I don't know, 50 members here on a given Sunday, let's say. And let's say that's between, people coming and going, maybe we have 70, 80 members here total, active members. Now, each one of those people knows somebody else, okay? I mean, just think about this conceptually. I don't know, 50 people, 100 people, whatever. We're going to call the church, right, the 80 people, we're going to call that the inner circle. And then we're going to have all the people that we have immediate contact with, like direct one-on-one, somebody directly knows them. Kind of the middle circle, right? Direct influence, we'll say. And then those people know somebody else, right? And we'll call that indirect influence. And then we have our community as a whole. And for this, just to frame the conversation, we're going to call it Meriwether County. The whole county, about last census numbers I checked was like 21,000 people. So, we're a small church. We know some people, but we're fit inside this community. Now, some of these people, just for random reason or whatever, we're never going to be able to get to contact. Just a small percentage of them. Some of them we can contact indirectly through mailers or a friend of a friend or a Facebook ad or, whatever, right? We can contact, let's say, 20,000 people. But of those 20,000 people, and we've put out ads, you can see the effectiveness of it, right? You're talking about single-digit percentage points. Whereas relational, right, are direct contacts. If we really get to know them and talk to them about these deeper spiritual issues, it's a lot more effective. Like, just for an example, invite somebody to church. I could put out a Facebook ad, 20,000 people, come to church. 1, 2, 3. We did it for VBS a couple years ago. We had 3 people. We mailed out something like 5,000 flyers. All right, you do the math. Whereas we had kids invite, their friends, and of the 5 kids that invited their friends, 3 showed up, right? Do the math, right? Percentage-wise, it's way, 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 way more effective. And so, maybe you've talked to somebody and, your friends, you have this conversation and you kind of get shut down, right? You're talking about these deeper things and they're like, we don't talk about that in my family. Well, where do you go from there, right? That's a hard thing. We're going to learn some of these techniques in this class. The other big thing is, just from that, we want to have influence with our relationships, right? We want to bring people to Christ. But we have to be genuine about it. And what that means is if you have a problem in your spiritual walk, you need to solve it first, right? You can't ask somebody to give money to the church when you're a tightwad. It doesn't look right. You can't, tell somebody about the love of Christ, if you don't have loving relationships, like say with your wife or whatever. So before you even step out into the mission field, you really need to be right here first, okay? We don't want to be disingenuous with people because people pick up on that very quickly. You really have to care about people the way they are. And that's tough. That's a mindset shift, right? Because you know what they could be, but they're not there yet. And if you look back on your life, neither were you when you first started. So we got to have some grace, but we have to be genuine. We're going to open up to people. We're going to, as we get through these barriers that people have to faith, a common technique that Gary's going to mention is, he calls it disclosure. And it's a way of opening up in your life as a way to break down these barriers in their life. So you wonder, why did I go through that hard thing that I went through? Maybe you went through divorce. Maybe you went through a medical issue. Maybe a job issue. Right? God, why did I have to go through those things? But when we talk to people, there are other people going through those same issues. And by you opening up on what God did for you in those issues, it may help remove that barrier from their life to come to know Christ. Now, again, right, this isn't a guarantee. This is a toolbox. But I think if you're uncomfortable with talking to people about faith, about the bigger things in life, what does it mean? Like, what does my life mean, in the big scheme of things? What happens to me after I die? What happened to Grandma when she passed away? Like, these are real issues, and we have the answers to these. But we have to get through these hurdles so people will even listen. It's funny, we just came out of the study on the 7 churches. And at the end of every one of those letters, he said, to he who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. We are not producing the speech. When we evangelize people, we're not creating anything new. All we're kind of doing, right, is kind of removing the earwax from the ears. We're helping people to listen, right, to hear God and what he has to say. Because society, and I think Satan has designed this, or played the long game, because there's a lot of things in society that contradict what we are claiming. And so we have to dig through all that. These people are buried underneath this junk. And so by developing that relationship, that gets us kind of inside the fence, right? We care about you, right? That's a level of trust. And now we're trying to help you. But inside the fence, think of it like a huge trash pile, right? And they're in the middle of it. We've got to kind of like clear a path, right, to them, to even be able to reach them. And I guess if the analogy is correct, like 50, 60, 70 years ago, there's a lot less trash. So the world has changed. And I think Gary Comer's come up with some techniques that'll help in today's day so we can reach people. Now I turn it over to you. I want this to be people texting me, sinners. What exactly do you want to get from this evangelism course? Some of you have asked for this, and I am not going to say, this is not my forte, honestly. I am going to learn just as much as you in this, and I'm excited for it because it's something that I'm not. But what do you want to get? Like, what are some of the issues that you've had talking to people about faith? Is there anything in particular that you want to see? Okay, dealing with rejection. It is true that this isn't a guarantee, and some people, even when you get to them, like you dig through the trash and they still have free will, and they still could just reject the gospel. That's true. But dealing with rejection, okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, I will do my best to try to lead us through this study. I think it's going to be a very interesting study. It's going to be less about the Bible, because this is a very practical application. Now, there are biblical concepts here, so it's not like we're going out on the left field, right? He's going to use like the biblical concepts of how Jesus dealt with The Samaritan woman at the well, that's one of his prime examples. But as a practical study, we're not going to, read 1 John 1, chapter 7,
This is more about methods.
Yeah, this is methods. This is very practical. So don't treat it as doctrine. I mean, if you, in your experience, find something else works better for you, feel free. But for those of us, and I'm really talking about me, right? This is hard stuff for me, right?
People are going to throw things at you like, why? How
Mhm.
can you prove it? How can you prove
Yeah.
this? That's what makes it
Yeah,
hard.
and some of us are afraid, right, to even get those, we don't want to go out into the field because we're afraid of what could be. All right, so we got to get past that. And, I want to encourage you. You've been in this class long enough, right?
I want to be more bold.
Yeah.
Towards people.
Yeah.
But I'm not, and I need to be.
You've been in this class long enough. You should have picked up a couple things, right? Honestly, if you've been in this class the past couple years, you're probably ahead of the curve of 95% of the other people at this church or in Christianity in general, honestly. Now, I don't think anybody's asking anyone to know everything about everything, but we should be prepared to, handle what we call the 80% rule, right? 80% of questions, they're all the same, right? Really, there's 5 basic arguments against Christianity. How did a guy rise from the dead? Why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? And then really everything else is kind of emotional arguments. And if we can answer the top 5, you're almost there. But what we're going to find is people have other roadblocks. It's not just logic. They were abused by their parents. They're overly sexualized for their age, right? We see that today, unfortunately. How do we reach these people, right? And we love them, we care for them. How do we get through the noise? And by developing relationships, that's one way we can do it. And so if there's anything that I really want to highlight from this introduction section that we're having is it's not enough anymore to send out tracts, to send out flyers, to just invite people to church. It's not enough anymore. Yes, David?
Are you going to cover things like how do you get to people who say Christians are nothing more than liars, hypocrites, they don't believe what they say, and I just don't want nothing to do with it?
We will talk about that. We will talk about that some. Obviously, spoiler alert, that's a very hard case to deal with. But we will talk about that. Gary talks about it. He calls them in his world, he divides it up into 8 paths, and they were the skeptical path, which is a very difficult path to come through. Some paths are easier to get through than others. But yes, we will talk about that. And really in that case, it's really going to be developing a very deep relationship where they even trust you to be able to even listen to any kind of response that you have. And that's why it's so important. You got to be right here first, because those skeptics are going to be watching you, right? They're going to call you out on every little thing that they see, and it's going to jeopardize them. This is it requires more from Christians, right? Relationship type stuff requires more from Christians. But I think when we look at the Bible, it's nothing more than what Jesus did himself. Right? Jesus was relational with people. And so what I want us to do when we think about this, adjust our mindset. It's not about Billy Graham style crusades where he's going in and he's preaching to 100,000 people and getting all these converts, right? Many of which I'm not convinced were real. I'd rather you really focus on 3 people in your life deeply, right? I'd rather see that. And that's kind of what Gary's about, these relationships. Because with relationships, it takes so much work. You cannot reach hundreds of people. You just can't. Like, there's not enough time in the day. But I was talking to a Chinese friend of mine. And in China, right, Christianity is not cool. But she came over, and she's converted. Her parents are not. And she was talking to me. She does Bible studies with people from China. And they have a lot of these like questions because they come from an atheistic background. Like, there is no God. And she takes two people, I think she operates on like a yearly basis. And in their church, they kind of assign two people to her a year. And the idea is this. If you could reach two people and really, bring them to the faith, genuine faith, and then bring them up to maturity or to a point to where they can grow, then they come to maturity and they take two people. And then they take two people. If you could do that 50 times, or maybe even less than that, I forget the number, it was like 37 times or something, you could evangelize the whole world in a generation. So let's get out of our mindset about, we're going to mail mailers to all of Meriwether County and, well, we did it, God. That's not the goal here. Really deep, genuine conversations to bring whoever will come to the faith. Unfortunately, some will not, but that's nothing new. I mean, it's nothing that the Bible hasn't already told us.
Their culture.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me. One of the other paths is other faiths. Hindu, Muslim, right? How do you get through to those people? That's also a difficult path because there's more than just religion there. There's like societal expectations, right? You don't want to disappoint your parents, right? That's a big motivation. But yet, the truth, we have to reach people for the truth. So I think it's going to be a great, great study. I'm really excited about it. So next week, we will do session 1. Watch the video. Each video is about 10 minutes. The longest one's like 14. So watch the video, think about it, and then we're going to come in, we're going to discuss it. And I expect a lot of discussion with this type stuff.
Can I suggest something?
Yes.
Can you do like you did before with a easel board and write things down and give us samples, visualize something?
Yes.
Other than just saying it. So visualizing is so much easier
Okay.
for learning.
Yes, I will work on that. Yes, totally. In fact, I was thinking about that last night. I was like, man, I really wish I had a whiteboard or something. So we'll work on that this week. There was one more thing. And I think I lost it. Anyway.
Would it be easier to use the screen in your laptop instead of the whiteboard?
I love technology, but sometimes it's just easier with a marker.
Well, just tell us what size you need. We'll just go get one for you.
I appreciate that.
It should be down in the basement.
I'll let you know. Yeah, I thought we had one somewhere, but we'll get it figured out. Be thinking about questions, right? The videos are a summary. I'm going to be reading ahead in the book to bring out any more details that I think are relevant. And of course, if you purchase the book, and
What's the name of it?
it's called Soul Whisperer by Gary Coleman. Or, sorry, that's not it. Gary Comer, C-O-M-E-R. Guess I'm thinking about
TV programs.
Gary Comer. Too much TV in my life. C-O-M-E-R. And I will send you a link to Right Now Video Study, which is completely free, and optionally, if you want to, there's a book available that you can purchase as well. I'm really excited about this. It seems like the Lord has been providential in this study because this is, like I said, a 10-week study. This building is going to be coming online shortly, and that's what it's here for, right? When I look back and I think of the things that we've studied, apologetics, deeper Bible study, teaching you how to study the Bible, right? You've been learning all this. I think it's going to be really interesting. I did have an example, and this is what I wanted to mention to you yesterday. I was in a small group a few years ago. A buddy of mine was leading it. And these two couples came in about the same time period. Same race, roughly the same age, same economic status, not, regular working folks. One couple is still there, has grown in the faith, been baptized, and really grown, like you could tell. And they're ready to branch off and, teach their own class if they want to. This has been over the course of a few years. The other couple stopped coming. Nice people, stopped coming, got really involved in a gym close to them, and have really just taken up in this fitness world that they live in, and they've really grown in that. Now the question I pose to you is, why? What's the difference here? What were they looking for? Is there something we could have done different? Obviously, fitness is wonderful. I need to focus more on that myself. But is that somehow greater than your spiritual life? Why would a couple come into a church that worships the infinite God with his glorious riches, right? We just studied this. He's got all the infinite wisdom, give you joy, peace, wisdom that surpasses all understanding, and yet they walk back out the door and join a gym. And somehow that they've picked up on that more. Does that seem odd? It does seem odd. Because if church was the place that it should be, when people come in, they're just going to want more.
Why can't you have both?
Well, you could have both. And if this example, this scenario was, well, they really got involved in both, hey, no problem. This is wonderful. But what I'm getting at is, why would somebody come in and taste and then walk away? Something about that is a failure. Now, again, we can't reach everybody, but it seems like we could do better here. And I'm hoping that and I think what happened, I know them a little bit more than what I'm getting at in my scenario. They were looking for a community, and the church was not providing that. That was a barrier to them. Now, we're not called to be a country club, but they didn't have a relationship. Nobody developed that relationship. And so they had nothing to hold on to come back to. Gary's going to call this drawing. Like you draw up a bucket from a well. If there's no rope, how are you going to get the bucket, right? There's a disconnect. This is the type of things that we're trying to avoid, because we have a lot of people that come through and we don't make that connection, and then we never see them again. It's like we're like a rubber band ball. Like they come and then they bounce right off.
You make friends at church, and you also do things with those friends to keep that development going.
Yeah.
Bring a Christian person with you to the gym,
Yeah.
Somebody you've got a relationship with. You're right. There's a lot of people at the church you don't have a relationship with. You only see them once a week.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's not really the way church is supposed to be.
And a lot of people too, I think, are looking for programs. They don't want to come and just hear somebody just talk for 30 minutes. They want a program.
Well,
They want that stage presence.
people are looking for different things. I think as a church and as missionaries for Jesus Christ, and that's really what you need to think of yourself as, right? You are an ambassador for Jesus Christ.
Right.
I don't care how they get here. but I want them to come to know the Lord. And that usually means I need them to come back, right? Or I need to meet them somewhere else. And that's going to require a relationship of some kind. And it's going to start off small, and it's going to grow. And it's not going to be the immediate, like we want it now. Like we want to hold an altar call, and I want people to come saved. And it's really more of a journey, right? People start off here, and they need to move to here. Now, we focused a lot on, you're already a Christian, how do you mature, right? Now we're backing up a step. You're not a Christian. How do we even get you to this point? And we're trying to help out, right? We're trying to unclog the ears. We're not changing the gospel in any way. We're not, I joke about it. We're not going to put up fog machines or anything like that, because it doesn't really matter. It's about the relationship that you have. And it's going to require effort on our part to start that. And let me bring this to your attention. If they show up here, they're looking for something, more than likely. Right. So use that as you're like, man, I don't know if they want to talk to me. They're here. They want to talk to somebody. And if everybody's like, well, somebody else talk to them, and nobody talks to them, we just wasted.
Yes.
So.
You can tell when you walk into church if it's friendly or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be more friendly.
We do. And I hope that this study will allow us to focus on some techniques and look at ourselves. Like, are we being friendly? Like, I know you. I know, like, I get it, right? But other people don't, right? So what are some things that we can do to start that conversation, to start that relationship? To when we get into an awkward part of the conversation, how do we respond? The study will give us practical advice. And I will take your rejection, I will take consideration of the things that you mentioned, but be prepared to come in with questions. And hopefully with all of us discussing it and all of our unique backgrounds and insights, that we can come up with some ways. And feel free to bring real world examples. Hey, I've got this friend, and he's a truck driver, and he doesn't believe, and he came to me with this objection, right? We had this conversation and it went like this. That's a great example. Maybe we can talk about that. I said we'd end early, and we are at time. If you have anything, please email me, text me, call me, whatever, and I'll be happy to study. I will send you the link tonight so you can watch it ahead of time, and I'll send you a link to the book. And I think that's it. Any other thoughts or questions before we, hit the ground running in the next 10 weeks or so? All right. Well, I'm excited. I really am, and I think this is going to be a good study for us. So, with that, we'll close in prayer, and then if you have availability, we could use some help moving tables and chairs out in the fellowship hall. Father, thank you for this time together. I thank you for this opportunity for us to study, how to approach people and how to tell them about you in an effective way to where we can answer people's questions and just remove the hurdles from their lives to come to know you. Father, I pray that you'll open our ears to the understanding and the wisdom that Gary's going to bring to us to be more effective, and just let us be genuine in our relationships, Father. We're not trying to rack up a high score. We're just trying to get people to know you because we know that you love them just like you loved us. Father, I pray that you'll be with us